17 of the fantasy baseball season, and here's a few hitters you should drop and get off your roster this week. The first guy is Tyrone ONeill of the St. Louis Cardinals. So it's been a tale of two tapes this season here for O'Neill. There's some weeks he has huge weeks, and some weeks he does nothing. And on the season for him, 17 homers, 40 RBIs, 45 runs, 9 stolen bases, a 264 average, and a 323 on base. So those numbers, they're pretty solid for the most part for O'Neill. But the last couple weeks here, he's been horrible. 1 home run, 2 RBIs, 2 stolen bases, 6 runs scored, a 196 average, and a 275 on base. So right now, he's not doing anything. He's not bringing anything to the table for fantasy owners. And it's surprising to me that he's still owned in 59% of fantasy leagues. So the last few games here for O'Neill, July 25th at Cincinnati, 2 for 3 with a homer, 2 RBIs, and 2 runs scored. July 27th at Cleveland, 0 for 4. July 28th at Cleveland, 0 for 4. July 30th versus Minnesota, 1 for 3. July 31st versus Minnesota, 0 for 3. And August 1st versus Minnesota, 1 for 4 with a run. So right now, he's in a bad slump. He's only got 2 hits right now in his last 7 games as O'Neill. And like I mentioned, he's not bringing anything to the table for fantasy owners. And he's only got 1 home run as well since July 19th. So right now, he's an easy drop in my opinion. And if he does get hot once again, owners could go out there and get him. But right now, there's no need for him to be owned in 59% of fantasy leagues. And he should be a drop this week while he's doing nothing. The second is Luis Urias of the Milwaukee Brewers. Urias was a hot pickup a few weeks ago. Plus, with his versatility, it's very good to see second, third, and shortstop he qualifies for in fantasy baseball. But right now, with the few trades here made in Milwaukee, he might be the odd man out when it's all said and done, is Urias. Colton Wong came back from injury, and we saw them trade for Eduardo Escobar a few days ago as well. And you're not going to bench Escobar, a guy who's got 22 home runs on the season and pretty much plays all the same positions as Urias. And also Willie Adames, who was a big pickup for them a couple months ago in a trade, and he's been red hot since he got there as well. So right now, with no injuries, it looks like Urias is the odd man out, and on the season, he's having a decent year. 13 homers, 47 RBIs, 50 runs scored, 5 stolen bases, a 236 average, and a 334 on base. But the last couple weeks here, with some playing time cut into already, and just struggles. He's an easy drop. No homers, 2 RBIs, 3 runs scored, a 133 average, and a 316 on base for him in the last few weeks. And the last couple games here for Urias, July 27th at Pittsburgh, 1 for 4. July 28th at Pittsburgh, 1 for 3 with 2 RBIs. July 29th at Pittsburgh, 1 for 5. July 30th at Atlanta, he only pinched hit in that ball game, 0 for 1. July 31st at Atlanta, 0 for 2. And August 1st at Atlanta, 1 for 3. So right now, he's not doing much of anything. Fantasy owners, they've dropped him in 3% of fantasy leagues. And right now, I think his numbers are going to go down more and the playing time. And he's an easy drop this week. The next play is J.D. Davis of the New York Mets. Davis, he came off the injured list a few weeks ago. And he got off to a great start with a couple games where he hit home runs, was Davis. So on the season, we haven't seen much of him after a bad injury. Only 83 at-bats, 4 homers, 11 RBIs, 10 runs scored, a 301 average, and a 389 on base in the last couple weeks here for Davis. No homers, no RBIs, 3 runs scored, a 176 average, and a 243 on base percentage in 34 at-bats. So right now, fantasy owners have dropped JD in 5% of fantasy leagues, and now he's not even playing as much here. There were rumblings he might have been included in a trade at the deadline, but obviously that didn't happen. And the Mets, though, did get Javier Baez. So Baez, he's been starting at shortstop with Lindor out. But once, Francisco Lindor comes back and Baez either shifts to second or third base, there's going to be no playing time at all here for Davis. And right now, there is no playing time the last few games as well for him, with Jonathan VR starting games and Brandon Drury on a definite hot streak for this Met team. So it looks like Davis is the odd man out in the infield for the Mets after the Baez deal. And he should be an odd man out of your fantasy team right now unless he gets hot again and gets things going. But that hasn't been the case for the last few games for Davis. July 25th versus Toronto, 2 for 3 with 2 runs scored. July 26th versus Atlanta, 1 for 6 in a doubleheader. July 27th, he only pinched hit versus Atlanta, 0 for 1. July 28th versus Atlanta, 0 for 4. July 29th versus Atlanta, 0 for 4. July 30th versus the Reds, he pinched hit, 0 for 1. July 31st versus the Reds, 0 for 1. And then August 1st versus the Reds, he sat out. So Davis here, he hasn't started the last 3 ball games for the Mets. And he's only got 3 hits since July 25th. And right now, he's an easy drop in my opinion. It was good to see him come off the injured list and have a couple big games. But right now, with VR, Brandon Drury, and Baez in the mix, and Lindor probably coming back in the next 2 to 3 weeks here, JD definitely won't have fantasy value, and he'll just be a bench player like he has been the last few games here for the Mets. Next hitter is his teammate Michael Conforto with the New York Mets that will look to drop. And Conforto, he's been a total disaster this season, and somehow he's still owned in 67% of fantasy leagues. But it's the same song and dance pretty much every season with Conforto. He only has one big month or two, and that's where he gets most of his numbers. But this season, he's really going through it, even though I know he missed a month and a half with the hamstring injury. But still, he's got 220 at-bats, 6 home runs, 24 RBIs, 21 runs scored, a 196 average, and a 324 on base. So the only thing going for him right now is he's still got a pretty solid on base percentage for a guy hitting under 200 on the season. But Met fans, they're getting tired of him. He's been hearing the boo birds over the last few games. And if it comes down to re-signing Javier Baez or Conforto, with both guys in contract seasons, if I'm a Met front office official or Steve Cohen, the owner of the Mets, in my opinion, it's an easy one. You got to re-sign Javier Baez. At least he could hit for power and still bat in the 230s and 240s. And Michael Conforto, he's just a streaky hitter. I know he's a homegrown Met, but he's a guy right now that's not producing. And fantasy owners have been holding on to him way too long as well. And the last couple weeks, 2 homers, 3 RBIs, 4 runs scored, a 156 average, and a 224 on base in the last 2 weeks. So right there, he did most of his damage in 1 ball game versus the Cincinnati Reds was Conforto. And ever since then, we've seen nothing from him. July 25th versus Toronto, 1 for 3 with a run. July 26th in a doubleheader versus the Braves, 1 for 6. July 27th versus the Braves, 2 for 4. July 28th versus the Braves, 0 for 2. July 29th versus Atlanta, 0 for 4. July 30th versus Cincinnati, 0 for 4. July 31st versus Cincinnati, 0 for 1. And August 1st versus Cincinnati, 0 for 2. So right now, this guy, he just cannot hit the baseball at all. And in the last week, he's 3 for 23, so he's not putting the ball in play. He's not even hitting home runs with the low average. And right now, he's an easy drop in my opinion. A guy who's doing nothing this week in the 5th and final hitter. I would look to drop this week's Gavin Gore of the Toronto Blue Jays. So Biggio, we know he's got good versatility in fantasy baseball at second, third, and outfield, and he's in one of the top offenses of all the major leagues. But he's another guy like Michael Conforto that he's just done nothing all season here. And at this point, he's just a name as well. 7 homers, 26 RBIs, 3 stolen bases, 26 runs, a 218 average, and a 317 on base in the last couple weeks here for Biggio. 1 homer, 2 RBIs, a run scored, a 167 average, and a 194 on base. So right here, his numbers are horrible and terrible as well, like Conforto. And the Blue Jays much as well over the last couple weeks here. And he's a guy still owned in 66% of leagues, which is mind-boggling to me too. Some of these owners, they're holding on to these guys because of name value. But right now, we're already in week 17. We're already in August here. And this is the time, if a guy hasn't done anything all season, is a time to drop him and find players on your waiver wire to get on your roster, especially if you're trying to battle to get into the playoffs in your leagues or try to win straight out this season. You can't be holding on to these guys who haven't produced in the first 4 months of the year. So the last few games for Biggio, July 25th at the Mets, he didn't start, 0 for 2. July 26th at Boston, 0 for 4. July 28th at Boston, 1 for 3 in a doubleheader. July 29th at Boston, 1 for 5 with an RBI. July 30th and July 31st versus Kansas City, he didn't start. And August 1st versus Kansas City, 0 for 3. So right here, Biggio, he just can't produce right now. And fantasy owners, they just got to cut these guys loose I know they're big names and stuff, but if they're not producing, it's time to drop them. So that's a few hitters I look to drop here in week 17 of the fantasy baseball season.